Tonight's workshop is on our proposed FY23 Capital Improvement Plan, our CIP. Mr. Superintendent, will you walk us through the workshop?
Yes, and I have Stephen Stilfen, our facilities director, and Doug Sherwood, our facilities coordinator, here with us tonight. And for those of you who are on the Finance and Operations Committee, Finance Personnel and Operations, you have heard much of this before, but we do have an updated version of what our CIP request is. So let me just provide a little bit of context for those who are new to this process. CIP is the Capital Improvement Plan, and it is an annual request that we make to the city council. This is bunched together with the city requests and constitutes the amount of money that's available to maintain and expand and update our buildings. So it pays for major construction across the city. So, as you'll see today, when we're, updating windows, or when we're doing updates that are ADA accessibility issues, or fixing furnaces and HVAC, this is the funding stream for that. It is sometimes used also for, a smaller thing. So, for example, our buses are purchased through CIP. So you will see in our request that there is, an update for, an additional bus that is just replacing an old one. There is a list maintained by our staff that is sort of a 10-year out projection of what are the things that we expect that we're going to need to fix, to upgrade, to bring up to code, and things along those lines. And that is the basis on which our annual requests are made. We also have a major sort of analysis of all of our facilities that was done in 2017 that looks further out, looks 20 years out, and says, what are the things that need to be updated within those next 20 years. And so that's our facilities assessment. And when we walk you through the actual CIP request for this year, you'll hear Mr. Sherwood reference that request. The process usually is for us to bring this through the operations committee to the board, which is what we're doing now. So this was at the operations committee back in October, revised, brought back to the operations and finance committee at the December meeting, and is now here with the board for a first reading, and then a subsequent approval at the next meeting on the 15th. It will then go to the city. We have been in conversations all along with the city manager to understand what is the size of the overall city CIP for this year, and trying to, have our request conform to the overall request for the city. This shows up in our budget as our debt service. So when we are talking, our budget in 6 weeks' time, there will be a substantial amount, somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 million, that is, our annual debt service cost. And these requests make up that debt service, because the way that this is funded is that the city bonds for these projects, and then, pays the interest on those bonds over time, over 10 years. And so, there is an adjustment that's made annually at the city, where they're looking at how much money is, how much of our current debt is fully paid off and replacing it, or making decisions to increase it or decrease it accordingly. So that's a little bit by way of context for what you will, what we're going to talk about in a minute. The other piece of context is that you will see in our request that there are a significant number of projects within that request that are also tied into something called the State Revolving Renovation Fund. That is a fund that the legislature, and then the legislature funds, and then the state board manages, whereby school districts can apply for medium-sized projects that are, fit a couple of priority areas. We submitted 4 projects, and those 4 projects were approved this last weekend. So as we walk through our request for this cycle, we will touch on those. And so I think that's it by way of introduction. Doug, I'm sure I've left important things out that you're going to touch on when you walk through that, but I was hoping now that we could just walk through the request for this coming year, which the board will then be asked to approve at the next meeting.
Very good. Thank you for the introduction, Superintendent Bodano. Welcome, everyone. It is another challenging year. As the superintendent said, we had a 2017 assessment. That assessment indicated that we should be investing $320 million over 20 years to sustain current programs. We typically get $1 to $4 million annually through this CIP program to address our most urgent needs. So this is our current list of those urgent needs. We have looked at that assessment again, as I said, from 2017. We continue to try and balance the most urgent against the available dollars. And one of those particular events happened this year. Since we started back in October, we actually had a failure of the header on the boiler at Paz back in late November, December. And so we replaced what was Lincoln as our first priority boiler with Paz, at what you'll see as a change perhaps from our last meeting in January, officially on the document. Also, a few changes from that document presented back on the 13th to the Ops and Finance joint meeting was the uptick, if you will, increases in the project estimate recommended actually by the Department of Education when we submitted the document. So the King Middle School project to replace rooftop HVAC was 187, it's now 188,550. The project for the rooftop units at Paz was 156, is now 161,350, and likewise a minor increase in more. So the new total, different from what we had last time, which was endorsed by those present at the last joint committee, 3.412120 is now $3,425,834. So just a minor increase, but significantly up from our original October numbers, as you'll see in the comments in the right-hand column. But to bring context back, this was a rather robust program when we started. All the projects that were still on this list that now show zeros, if they had the original numbers, this estimate had grown to almost 4.9 million. The city advised us in meetings in December that that particular amount was not going to be achievable. As the superintendent just mentioned, we've had ongoing dialogue and even meetings with the interim city manager at different levels, and have gotten feedback that we're pretty confirmed that this 3.4 million would be supported through the process, which not only goes from committee to the board, but from the board as a recommendation to the council. Superintendent mentioned that the State Revolving Renovation Fund is one of the many sources we have for facilities across the state and then different programs. This particular request for the 4 programs that I mentioned already, the 3 HVAC projects, are also getting support on the structural repairs on the Portland High roof, brings the total in the State Revolving Renovation Fund to just over $1 million. And to give context to that program, it's a 0% loan. and 30% of the total amount is forgiven. So there is good rationale for many of us to pursue these options. In fact, across the state, I believe the city had over 140 applications, 120 of which were funded. So to get to the specifics of this particular program, many of you know that have been with us for a long time, windows are a key need for us, a really prime investment we made or had the opportunity through the federal funding to do some window work. So we're asking for a pause this particular year. We are also in the year 4, or working on year 4 of 5 of our security improvements, and we're a little bit behind the 8 ball on that. So we're deferring that one more year. The roof at Portland High, this is just phase 1 of what could be approaching maybe $5 million before we're all done. But this is the most urgent sections of the roof. We still have repairs ongoing, almost seems like a daily basis at certain times of the year. We are currently working on single user restrooms as part of the last year's ADA project, and we're hoping that will suffice to meet the needs of the students at Talbot. So we're putting a pause on that for 1 year. The HVAC units ended up as priorities 27, 33, 34 on the state list. And so it had good stature within the list of 119 funded. We've decided to defer the tanks feed tanks at Deering High. The Lincoln boiler was replaced by the Paz boiler. We will try and get the work done out at Cliff Island under operating budget. And as the superintendent just recently stated, we have a transportation bus at 87 replacement in this program. So what we're asking to endorse and move forward is $3,425,834.
I failed to do something, Doug, so I apologize. There are a number of documents that are included in the packet.
It's the last document, yeah.
Make sure that you understood, and that's why I flashed this one up there. It is the one that's listed as updated, revised to staff recommended PPS FY23 CIP. So that's the one that you're being asked to approve. The others were different iterations along the way. For those who have been a part of the process through the operations committee, we wanted to make sure that everybody saw the different iterations from the October 7th version to the multiple versions that we talked about in January, and to the one that we've actually evolved it to. Also in the packet is the 6-year CIP, which is the one that we base our requests off of. That looks at, 6 years of what the priorities are. And, to Doug's point, when he said that, we would need, if it's $320 million over 20 years, it is substantially more than what we're able to, invest on any given year. And so, things keep getting pushed out further. And so you'll see that in the 6-year CIP, that some of these items that were on this list that we subsequently have deferred have now moved into the next year's CIP list. So that is the unfortunate reality of, trying to do this, is that, there's, clearly more need than what we have the capacity to raise revenue for. And so we are, making these prioritizations, and, that's what we wanted to share with you today.
I think it's also important to note that there are other funding options that we've tried to leverage over time. Obviously, the Maine Department of Education's major capital school construction program allowed us to construct the East End School, Ocean Avenue, and Row. As the superintendent noted, we're fighting hard to get integrated consolidated 916 educational facility. We've had the state revolving fund support a number of projects. I mentioned the 4 this year, totaling just over $1 million. We've gone to the Portland taxpayer referendum. That's how we're working on the 4 BFOF projects now at Lyseth, Longfellow, Przomska, and Reiki. We've made some energy investments over time, both in the late 90s and again in 2010, and I think the city's looking at another one coming up. And for those of us most recently in anxious or alternative forms of energy, we also recently engaged in a fairly significant joint partnership with multiple parties for a solar investment that we hope to see start reaping benefits in the year ahead. So it's not just one, but this is a critical one to keep our most urgent needs moving forward.
So, any questions, comments and so on, we would welcome them now. Again, our goal is, unless there are significant changes to this, to bring this back for board approval at the next meeting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Superintendent, and thank you, Mr. Sherwood. I will just start off by saying that, $3.4 million is not going to get us where we need to go in terms of the investments needed just to sustain our current programs. I think I say this every year, but I will keep saying it. We're not digging ourselves out of the hole. So I supported this at the committee. I will continue to support it. But I guess I didn't, I am an official member of the finance committee now. So I did support it at committee. In past years, I have not supported CIP requests because I knew that they were inadequate to meet our need, but I understand that this is this is as good as we're going to get from the city this year. So just acknowledging that we are not meeting the needs of our facilities because we don't have the resources to do it. With that, are there questions on the specific proposal before us or any comments on it? Okay, I don't see any questions or comments from the board. I do want to just recognize that this was a very well contextualized workshop. Thank you for that, Mr. Superintendent, and thank you, Mr. Sherwood, for providing additional context and helping us understand the specific projects and how it fits with other programs and funding sources that we're accessing. So thank you so much for the information tonight. Great, and that will conclude our workshop and our meeting. So thank you so much for all of your work tonight, and we will see you on the 18th. Not the 18th, the 15th.